human race. You break the ribbon with your face, the world spins out of control. Underwear and sexy clothes, perfect asshole, perfect nose, beautiful insides if you like brown. Punch me in the...
Hey everybody, welcome to the Independent Ink with Mr. Fish. What follows is a conversation I recently had with three fellow cartoonists, starting with Ann Telnaes. Ann Telnaes is now a multi-Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist. She was the cartoonist for the Washington Post for many years until she recently and famously, I guess, quit because they tried to muzzle her and prevent her from going after all of the people who deserve all the vitriolic disdain that we can heap upon them. So she has moved on to her own Substack, which is called Open Windows. So go check out Open Windows, throw all the support you can at Ann, see what she's up to. You can also go to anntelnaes.com where there are links to her books and interviews and all things Ann. So go check that out. Again, if you don't know her work, you really should. It's so beautifully elegant the way she draws. Very Mary Blair, early Disney, 1940s, 50s, early 60s. Again, really gorgeous, just artwork alone. But of course, Anne adds teeth and targeting to these drawings to make them absolutely exquisitely daring. So the next person that I had in the conversation is Steve Brodner, who you also will know for sure. He's been doing his work for many decades, also prize winning, out the ass, I think is how we like to put that in the industry. His work, for my money, he is the greatest caricaturist that the United States has ever produced. How is that for high praise? Very Daumier, very expressive and revealing portraiture work. So again, you know who he is. He is fantastic. The third person is another fantastic fellow whose name is Keith Knight, who goes by the name of Keef. He had a strip that ran for many years called the K Chronicles. So you probably have seen that somewhere in your travels in life. He also had a show on Hulu a couple years ago called Woke. That was, again, very fantastic. What I really love about what Keef does is he injects a great deal of humor and the soul and intent of an activist inside of his work, revealing what it means to be Black in America. With a dominant culture that is oh so very white, that can be very combustible in very horrible and destructive ways. It's also a great source for some really great jokes, which Keef is an expert at rendering. One thing that I'll mention is that during the recording, there was a great deal of hiss happening, and a lot of it seemed to be coming from Ann's computer. I was able to clean a great deal of that up. So during the conversation, you'll see me maybe doing this to Ann, people saying, "Can you please quiet the hiss?" or just like, "Do what you need to do, Ann." She would mute, and it would come slowly back up. But I was able to, in post, clean that up to such a degree that you might not know what we're talking about without me mentioning the fact that there was hiss that I've now magically erased for your listening pleasure. So in response to that question, what happens when four cartoonists get together with the aid of their visual language to help explain who we are, where we're going, what we should do about the fucked upness of the world? What happens when all they have is their voices? Well, this is what happens. Enjoy the show. Well, maybe we should just freaking start and then just have Steve show up. That'll be fun.
Yes.
Yes. That is a yes from
Yes.
our friend Keith. Yes. And can I get a thumbs up that has some sort of... Man, I'm the only one. Look at this. Yeah,
So
I mean, you don't even know what the thought is that I'm having when I do that. Oh man, that would be great if it just like actually pans to the side and inside the thought bubble is this. And this, as you can see, brings nothing. I
doesn't
get
it?
more use actually out of this. In the times that we live in, this is useful.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of this.
No.
Yeah, we're being encouraged to have optimism, which I don't like. Okay, so I'm going to begin our conversation. Right now, we are waiting for Steve Brodner to show up. My guess is that he's getting his hair ready, if he can find it. No, he'll appreciate that. Hopefully, at the rebroadcast. Okay, so the conversation that I really wanted to have with you, like-minded riffraff friends of mine, is we've all gotten a version of the most annoying question as cartoonists, which is, how did you begin? How did you start? And I feel like I've heard the answer from everybody the same way. I've always drawn, I've always done this and that. I find that sort of excruciating. So I'm not going to ask that question. But what I will ask is, what do you think your job is? What do you like? What do you do? I know from an audience perspective, most of the people that look at our stuff are non-artists, and so they're thrilled by seeing art that is created that they just can't do. So I know how they interpret what we do, but I'm very curious to ask what you think about what you do. What is your responsibility? Let's begin with that. So let's say Anne. Let's start with you.
Okay. So my responsibility as an editorial cartoonist, or how I describe myself?
Well, there's an interesting question. Don't try to describe yourself. It's like, what is your intention? Why are you doing this? Because my guess is that everybody that I'm going to be speaking to, all three of you when the third person arrives, would be doing this even if you weren't being paid to do it.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Well,
think,
I mean, okay, so going back to what you said about all of us would respond that we've been drawing our whole lives, right? So I as well, as a young girl, I was drawing princesses and horses. Very young girl. Um, but I think the change for me at least happened when I decided I wanted to say something through my art. And that came relatively late. I mean, I started uh, as a character animator, so I was doing, I was creating films and stories that didn't necessarily have something that I wanted to say, you know. Um, but once I decided that once I became more interested in what was actually going on around me in the world, and a couple of situations that I watched on television, like the Anita Hill Clarence Thomas hearings.
right,
I decided I wanted to say something with my work. So that's when I
right.
started to kind of pivot, you know.
And I would even say, like, because it's a great answer, because what you're really saying is you wanted to involve yourself in this conversation that was happening, and you had the confidence to want to render an opinion. It sounds like, and maybe this is true for other political cartoonists, when you see the oversimplified version of political conversation being exercised in the mainstream, it's very frustrating because it seems too overly simplistic. It's partisan in a way that is frustrating, because you want to get to what is the human story here? Not what is the Democratic side of this? What is the Republican side of this? What is the human side of this? So I feel like part of your answer has to do with that frustration, which is just like, you know what? I want to enter into this debate not as a political hack, not as somebody who is supporting the power structure, but somebody who wants to have a human voice in the circus, inside the circus.
I mean, I didn't even know what the power structure was at that point. What I was doing, I was trying to express my opinion through my personal experiences.
Right.
And, I had been a young woman that, had dealt with sexual harassment. So watching those hearings had quite an effect on me.
Right.
So it wasn't like I had an agenda. I just decided, hey, I should be speaking my mind, and I'm going to do it through my art.
Yeah, 100%. Well, we have Steve now, Steve Brodner, who has joined the party. So let me bring him in. Oh, I see we have a Steve and a guest. Is that your interpreter, or is that your food taster? What's that?
This is Jazz, the Shmoo,
Oh,
North
wow.
American short-haired, semi-domesticated Shmoo. And he's actually my art director. And I don't do anything without him.
Right. A man
I
of few
sit over
words.
here. This is my drawing table, and this is his little seat. He sits in this chair. And, we're sensitive to each other. He never takes his eyes off me. And I'm never sure what that means. Hi, everybody. I see Anne.
Hi.
I see
Hi,
Keef.
Steve.
How you guys doing?
Yes, we've already started the conversation, in fact.
I'm sorry.
No, no worries. We're keeping this very sort of chill and open and organic and
Good. Like him. He's very organic.
cue sneeze. I saw
I
that.
think he's a secret Republican, He never denied it. He never denied it.
So what we were talking
where were
about,
you? What were you discussing the minute
we were discussing, and Anne has given a very good answer that I don't know what you're going to do with the genius that she just unleashed that you missed. But the question had to do with, I had said that quite often when we are asked as cartoonists and illustrators and artists how we started, it's always the same thing. I've always drawn as a child, this and that. It's just, I find that kind of exhausting. So I wanted to jump past that and ask the broader question of what is your responsibility? What do you feel your responsibility is? And what is it that you think you do? Because what I had said was that my guess is that you would be doing this work even if you weren't being paid for it. So you're driven to do this kind of work. And I'm curious to know why you do it and what you think you're doing. But since you came in late,
That's really the best way to ask it. What do you think you're doing anyway?
who the hell are you?
The only answer is who the hell knows.
Right.
As good as mine.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to tell the truth best I can. That's it. Try to tell the truth. I think it's a cartoonist's job to boil everything down to a symbol that can be not only understood but also that will resonate with the viewer.
And so you have to have confidence that it will, right? I mean, is that
no,
one of
I have
those
no
things?
I don't believe in anything anymore. I don't expect anything anymore. We're seeing a widespread, complete, what do you call it? A mass extinction event here.
Yes.
And I think I don't really know what we can do to match the urgency of it. To me, that's really the big question right now for us and for all Americans. What can we do to match this? Because the old solutions for protest and commentary and strong objection are ill-suited, I think, to fascist takeover. What do we do? To me, that's the big question. What do we do now that we know we are in the midst of a fascist takeover?
I think that's the perfect question, and I think that one of the things that we have to consider is the best that we can do is live incrementally, live for the moment that we're in, try to string a number of moments together that have sort of the urgency to demonstrate that we have empathy and concern for each other in a nonpartisan way. And that's the best that we can do. And if we can demonstrate that there is real virtue in that, because we all know that. We all have friends and family that we like to keep the company of. And that's what a meaningful life is. So if we can if we can inject the work that we do to remind people of the vulnerability that we all are going to suffer the same catastrophic end if we don't bring our private selves into the public sphere, to demonstrate that we are human beings and that we do actually care about it. But let me get Keef in here, because he's had longer than anybody to ponder the question of who the hell are you and what are you doing. So this better be good.
Yeah. Now, I think for me, I think what I feel like I do is to just in some ways what Steve said, which is sort of speaks some sort of truth. I think coming up through school and seeing the way Black people are represented in the media, like coming to the realization that it's all filtered through white people, like that, you know, the way people are depicted, Black people are depicted in movies, in history, in television, uh, and coming to that realization, and then discovering the written work of people like Maya Angelou and James Baldwin, and recognizing that the issues that they talk about are the issues that I'm talking about at the same time. Like that, to me, the comics that I do will be a record of somebody Black, you know, talking about their own lives.
Yeah.
And that to me is what I think is super important. So
And you can see it in your work. I mean, one of the things that I really like about what you do is that you do have that absolute love of I would say culture over politics. Because one of the things that can happen as a political cartoonist, you can start to allow other people to draw the parameters of how this discussion is going to go. And then you fall into that trap of just figuring out what's the best way to say F you to the GOP, generally speaking, if we're looking about people who are engaged in the profession. So one of the things that I really love about what your work is about is that you utilize a great deal of just humor. There's just a lot of stuff in your work that is just jokes that reflect your experience. And again, just and what often happens between this disconnect between the white community and the Black community, and you render it in a way that's not furious, that is recognizing the high hilarity that can turn ugly, obviously, but at the center of this miscommunication, you can call it, there is an opportunity. The learning opportunity is such that we can laugh at our failures of inability to recognize that the Black community is just people. The same thing as I've said before about rich people or poor people with money, right? So if you start to see what is the equalizing thing that is the through line that connects us all, and then you figure out how you're going to communicate, you use humor, you use what, you mentioned Maya Angelou, you mentioned like there's novelists, there's poets, there's musicians. I know you're a musician yourself, Keef. So using all different kinds of language to communicate the commonality, but the diverseness of that commonality, I think is one of the key ways to move forward as well.
Yeah, and I feel lucky because I work in the different formats. I could do a single panel if I need to, but I also do the autobiographical multi-panel. So I like the idea of being able to sort of jump back and forth, because I think it would drive me crazy if I just was doing one, the same thing over and over again. And it's
Yeah. And so, Anne, that as the other non-white male here at in the group, a lot of your work has really addressed the imbalance, or what the expectations are from like a woman cartoonist, and talk about that trajectory, because as we move forward, it becomes more and more obvious that there is not this substantive difference
of just like, now I'm going to lower my expectations because Anne is a woman and now she's attempting cartoon, that's been blown out of the water. That's like absolute bullshit. So, I mean, you must feel that as you continue to win like the highest prizes that they can give to a cartoonist. It must feel good to just to not have the baggage that through history has minimized the participation of women in practically everything.
It's really funny that you bring that up because I just came back from a few trips to Europe talking about cartoons and free press, and I met up with Liza Donnelly, who was with the New Yorker, and we had a joint exhibition in Morges, which is close to Geneva, Switzerland. And we were talking about, because it was our work throughout our career through it, and we were just talking about how things have changed, and we were laughing because there was a time, especially when I first started, so that was about 30 years ago, where if you were doing a cartoon where you had two figures talking about what was going on in the news, right? They're sitting around having coffee. You always had to draw them as male, because if you drew them both as female, then automatically the audience would think, wait, is this about a women's issue? So you couldn't do two women, right? But now you can. Now I've done that. I've done two women talking, having coffee, talking about nuclear disarmament, that kind of stuff. So that has changed. Absolutely. And Liza and I also commented, this was the first time that even though we were talking about women's issues, when we were getting interviewed, we talked about world events. They didn't even ask us, what does it feel like to be a woman cartoonist? Because that used to always be the first question that popped out of anyone's mouth. And I can even remember a time where Sidney Wilkinson, who was the first woman to win the Pulitzer, she and I would never, ever be on the same panel discussion because they already had one woman, so why would they need another one?
Right.
And then,
they covered the quota.
Then we both did a presentation together just as cartoonists. So things are changing a bit.
Your audio now is...
Is this my audio again?
The ocean is getting...
Did that
See? Man, if women only knew how to handle technology, is what I'm trying to...
No, did that...
It's a little better.
Yeah,
This is so weird. I don't understand why...
What did you do to minimize the sound of the ocean? You can, Anne can do anything.
Yes.
It came in as she was talking about her multiple trips overseas.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Just tell me when it gets unbearable and I'll do whatever the hell I did.
No,
right.
But that's a great point that you make about when I started my single panel cartoon, like I just wanted to create an editorial cartoon where the average person is a Black person talking about whatever politics were going on, or two Black people having that discussion. So, I don't think we've quite gotten there where other folks are doing.
Do you remember, Keef? Do you remember when cartoonists would use a trope called John Q. Public?
Yeah.
John Q. Public was always a slightly overweight man, or a very overweight man with a little fedora, and he was white. And it was kind of not a revolution or anything, but it was a step forward when John Q. Public was a Black man. And the first time I saw that was in Detroit, and the cartoonist was an old timer who probably nobody here remembers, named Draper Hill, dead and gone many years. But he had the sense, because he realized he's working for Detroit News. This is a predominantly now Black city. John Q. Public has to be African American. And when he did that, to me, it was oh yeah, how about that? Moment. And it came from this old white guy. He was pretty smart.
Which is interesting. I mean, just having this kind of conversation,
But I'm sorry, there were no black editorial cartoonists at that time, to my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there were.
What year was it?
There were, but they were Black newspapers.
In the Black papers, right? Yeah.
Right.
But I'm talking about like the big city papers. I can't think of any.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just interesting to be talking this way because it is true. Like these advances that happen, which are profound, significant. I always find it really interesting because it's just getting to the truth. The fact that the multiplicity is made up of equal beings, it's such a frustrating thing to think of, like, oh, finally we're starting to realize what the facts are, as it's been demonstrated through since the beginning of time, right? Um, it, and we're talking at a time when the United States government is being driven and self-celebrated by as many white men as you can cram into, the doomsday machine. Um, and again, this to me is something that I do want to get into this conversation is, do you think that there might be a strategy moving forward as commentators and critics of power and hierarchy and so forth? Is there merit in understanding that the way to move forward is to focus on giving more strength and power to the culture? Essentially starting to ignore the politics. Because if we look at the 1960s, look at the late 50s going into the 60s and then the early 70s, I think that most of the changes that were positive for the human race did not come from politics. Politics tried to shut it down. If you consider this the sexual revolution, civil rights, the gay rights, all of these things, there were barriers that were set up by the government to try to stop it or at least slow it down. And there are these cultural movements that basically said, "Fuck you, we're gonna do it ourselves now." And I wonder if you're perceiving in contemporary times this, what I think might be the loss of the middle class, which is where cultural movements are able to manifest and then grow. Where are the cultural heroes to determine what the conversation should be about, and then invigorating the application of greater morals, greater responsibility for the environment, all of these things that big business and government are constantly minimizing and trying to just truncate and just snuff out of existence?
Well, real quick, I mean, is our cultural movement more the fact that the average guy can actually participate and make themselves heard rather than the legacy media controlling everything? I mean, look at Steve. I mean, Steve is a one man machine, about art, protests, everything. I mean, you just go to his Substack. Keith has been doing this for years. I mean, he's his own man. He's going around doing his thing and speaking his mind. So I don't know, maybe it's just the fact that the average person can have a say just because there are more platforms for them, and they're open to us too. I mean, look at the three of us. None of us, or four of us actually, none of us are with legacy media anymore. We're basically doing our own thing. So maybe that's it. I don't know.
Well, I wonder though, because yes, there are more platforms, but I would argue that there's more virtual platforms. And I think that having a virtual community is different from having an analog community, particularly when it comes to activism and it comes to threatening the status quo, shifting the dominant culture, because you do need, for lack of a better word, you do need boots on the ground. You do need disruptions of people who are gathered in physical spaces, because that does make people at the top of a power structure, power brokers, that's what makes them nervous.
Yeah, but how do you organize that?
That's the question.
But you're not picking up the phone. You're doing it on social media or whatever. That's
but I guess, but even that's true. However, how do we get that? How do we increase the megaphone in such a way that we can, even though it's might not be our mission, but to almost infiltrate mainstream so that this voice can become mainstream?
What's
Because if you,
mainstream, Dwayne? How do you define mainstream
I define it as
right now? I mean, If we were talking
don't-
in 1973, that would be easy. Time Magazine, Newsweek, New York Times,
That, but
ABC, NBC, CBS, the end.
but also but the arts community. I mean, it's not just about having, a political activism rendered through journalism platforms. I think that using the arts community at one time was much more involved in this kind of activity, and it made the movement sexy, interesting, daring in a way that made people feel like that they were being outlaws for the right causes. I mean, even if you just look at mainstream music, for example, if you even look at the 1960s, you could have you would have freaking John Coltrane being radical in that kind of way, changing how people think and feel about how they exist in the world with each other. You had Bob Dylan. You even had Peter, Paul, and Mary. You had some what I would call mainstream artists who were like talking about political issues without fear of cancellation, because the culture was there to absorb it and echo it back. And I think Anne makes a good point. Like, where's this echoing going to be happening? Where are people going to feel safe enough to render an opinion that is contrary to what the power structure is saying is appropriate? And how safe do you feel in rendering that opinion? I mean, it's a very serious question, because especially if we're getting rid of if the mainstream is, and I would argue, if anybody wants to argue with that, I think that it's not what it used to be. And I think that as you're graduating college now, even, there's this idea, if I don't sell out and I don't go for a career that is going to pay me a great deal of money, I will literally not be able to survive. So I will learn how to self-censor in order literally just to survive. And then once you even get to that, safe plateau, then creature comforts are added. Just like, oh, okay, this, I get rewarded. Penalties, I get penalties for speaking up against power. But if I keep my mouth shut, and then if I become a cheerleader for power, oh my gosh, I'm rewarded out the ass, I think is what the Amish
It's
would
not
say.
as simple as that, What the Congress did yesterday was to pass a bill that's going to throw 8 million people off of Medicaid. And it's going to cut $500 billion from Medicare. That's not people being safe. That's
No.
not people being able to go back. See, up until right now, this is a great day to have this. What is it, the 23rd
Yes.
of May? On this day, I believe we are seeing the pivot. The pivot between GOP MAGA politics being a fascinating abstraction for America to becoming a bleeding, infected wound. Every day that wound gets bigger, the more it gets felt. And you can't spin that. You can try.
And they will.
They have been very successful.
Yeah.
Pre-wound. Once you have stuck the knife in people, you have a different politics. I don't know what shape it's going to take, but to your point earlier, in the 1960s, it was an abstraction until my brother goes to Vietnam and comes back in a box. Then it's no longer an abstraction. It's an abstraction until I see people in Selma getting attacked by hoses and dogs, and John Lewis getting his head bashed. It's all on film. It's on Walter Cronkite every night. Now you don't have to wait for Walter Cronkite. It's here. George Floyd was here immediately. All of this is ricocheting across our consciousness.
Yeah.
Again, the minute it becomes palpable, then the political activism will come. And you're seeing it already with Bruce Springsteen. You're seeing it with Robert De Niro. You wonder where it's going to come. You don't have to worry. Did anybody see the Bob Dylan movie?
Yeah.
No, it's a good movie. So there's a scene where he comes to New York out of, Minnesota, out of nowhere. He's got his guitar on his back. He doesn't have any money. He wants to meet Woody Guthrie. who he finds out is in a hospital in Queens, dying. And I'm looking at the scene that's recreated. I'm old enough to remember that scene. Not exactly early 60s, but mid 60s. And all those clubs in the Lower East Side, in the Village.
Yep.
And Fillmore East, etc., where all these guys would perform. And I remember this thing bubbling up, and it didn't come from Lyndon Johnson, and it didn't come from anybody else. It came from the bottom up. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen with an equal amount of power and magnitude.
That's
But
the hope.
I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
From the time of the beginning of the civil rights movement, which is in the 50s, right, until the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that's 10 years. Okay? We're talking 4 months only here. It takes time. It takes time for these things to develop. And it takes time for leaders to show. And I also contend that the Democratic Party in a year, 2 years, will not be the same Democratic Party that we see now.
It can't be.
It cannot be.
100%.
New leaders, people whose names we don't know, whose faces we don't know, are going to emerge by virtue of the authority that comes from their passion, and how much of the truth can they tell, and how well can they tell it. We don't know who those people are yet.
Well, this is, if I can, Keef, I want to get you in on this, because one of the things that I totally agree, Steve, that we're living in a galvanizing moment that should inspire a massive resistance movement of some sort, right? And again, like, we don't know how that's going to manifest. It's these things we just don't know. But the question, like the harder question always for me is, how much is a resistance movement, a contemporary resistance movement, how much stamina is inside of something like that? Because I do feel like, and this is when I will start to show, my age. I feel like the social media, all the technology that we've been experiencing, that now sort of defines our ability to interact with the world, right? I think that we're losing more and more the ability to contemplate on things, to sustain any discomfort for any real length of time, right? I think that attention spans are just like being shrunk down to this level, to where when it comes to a resistance movement, it's, as we all know, if you just look at history, it's a series of horrible failures over and over and over again. For many people, it's humiliating. That's why I said that, like, bringing in the arts community to reflect something that is the opposite of why you should be humiliated, why you should be celebrated. All of these things have to give somebody sustainability to endure the discomfort of being threatened with getting smashed over the head, losing your job, all of these things. So that's, for me, that's the question mark. Is it going to be possible? And that's why, Keef, I know that you've done, your fair amount of activism. What do you see inside of communities as far as, building a movement that is going to have real effect?
Well, there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on that you guys talked about, which is, it is kind of crazy that Bruce Springsteen, one of the biggest artists, is like the voice of, anti-Trump. And what's amazing to me is sort of, like I'm sure that a lot of these folks who voted for him are Bruce Springsteen fans too at the same time. They, and someone who was contemplating online, at some point they have to make a decision on which way they're going to go with that. But it's like, this stuff, I see a lot of stuff happening on the ground, but just in very small pockets. And it's out of the view, I think, of even social media. Like, people are just I think they're doing their things in pockets and things right now, and I think it's going to slowly grow. I think it is going to. I don't think it's going to be a full 10 years before it all, manifests, because everything seems to happen faster.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
but uh, what was the point? There was one. Oh, ultimately, what's going to happen is once people's grandparents stop getting checks, that's when it's all going to turn. Is when people's grandparents and parents aren't getting checks anymore. That's when it's like, oh, okay. I was fine with bombing other countries. I was fine with sending out, brown people out here. I was fine there. But once it hits, my family, then I got a problem. And
Yeah.
sadly, it's going to come down to that. And
Well, that's the experience too. It because I just now finished 11 years teaching at University of Pennsylvania, and I was let go. And in the process of all of the questions about academic freedom and doing work critical of Israel and all the stuff that all of a sudden made me not invited into the ivory tower anymore. It was very interesting talking to many of my colleagues there because uh, right after Trump was elected, we had sort of a gathering of faculty and graduate students and stuff. And the consensus was, all right, so what are we going to do moving forward? Because I worked for Annenberg, the communication tool, right? How are we going to communicate to the community what's going on? Some graduate students said all the right stuff of just like, we actually do have to communicate because Annenberg at University of Pennsylvania is largely seen as a research facility. And maybe you could go there for marketing, nothing else. So it was just like, we've got to shift that and actually reach out to community organizers and stuff and just have some real meaningful conversations in society. But what they were essentially saying was, all right, the strategy for Penn, Annenberg in particular, is that we're going to keep our heads down and we're going to try to wait this out. And I was just like, do you understand what a white privileged position that is? Because you can afford, there's other people who are actually suffering in a much more deeper way. They got rid of all their adjuncts. And this is just like the faculty thing. Forget about all the other politics, that screw people. Again, like if you just talk about Gaza, if you just talk about the lower income people in this country, the trans people, the gay movement, all of that stuff, those people are seriously suffering. So to have a privileged institution say, okay, the strategy is we're going to be quiet and hope for the best at the midterms is not a strategy. And just to your point, which we both, Steve and Keith, what you were saying is that once you get people to have that personal discomfort, whether they're seeing it rendered in their family, that all of a sudden they're going to give a shit. The same thing with what happened with Vietnam. All of a sudden, when it starts to affect you, it's just like, oh, I've been politicized to actually be a human being, right? And I think that maybe we can agree on this, that part of our mission as artists is to try to force that kind of recognition before it's demonstrated in real time in front of us, right? You don't need a seagull hobbling on one leg down the beach with like a tampon applicator sticking out of its ass. And we say, we should do something about pollution. You should be able to sort of anticipate treachery, agony, mayhem, so you can avoid it. Not so you have something this is going to keep me, barely surviving as a cartoonist because I have a great subject to complain about. We don't want to ever end up in that space.
No danger, yeah.
Yeah, no, believe me, I just want to do cartoons about my kid's baseball team, actually.
Oh, 100%. Like how many of us, this is because it's true. And I've often wondered this because all of your stuff is fantastic. And I think that people would probably argue that the best things and the things that we're known for are the things that paint the darkest picture. That say, wow, you really nailed that. I don't feel so alone in, why I'm so worried about something because you really captured it. When in reality, I wonder if just what Keith said, because I'm the same way. I'm just like, you know what? I would be so happy if I just had a barn and I could just like pursue art for art's sake. I don't need Trump and people like that. I don't need monsters to have a meaningful voice as an artist, and I don't want it. Like how can we get ourselves to retire and just like co-own like a flower shop somewhere? That'd be nice.
Yeah, but I think, but to that point, I mean, when I thought that Trump wasn't going to win, which I did for a certain amount of time, and I thought we were actually going to have a woman president for once, um, I actually thought about, when I was going to stop doing, my then position of editorial cartoonist. It wasn't that I was going to stop art, but I was just going to
Yeah.
pivot to something else, right?
Yeah.
And when that didn't happen and he won, my immediate thought was, oh shit,
Yeah.
I'm tired already. But then my next thought was, okay, like Steve has posted many times, we're gonna buckle up and we're gonna go forward, and you're gonna do cartoons about Trump again.
Yeah.
And it's not that I enjoy doing cartoons about Trump, but
Right.
I feel I have to. And even though my plans were to back off maybe soon, maybe do some commentary on the first woman president, since I'm a woman cartoonist, I can be much meaner than my male colleagues. I plan on doing that for a while, but then I thought, well, then maybe I'm going to pivot to do something else. But those were my plans at the time, and I think as an artist that does commentary, which we all do, I think that when a crisis happens, and we're in a crisis, that's what you are immediately drawn to doing. You're not going to sit there and go, oh, I want to go out to a farm and just draw out flowers. You have to draw something that because it's a very, very perilous time.
I think you need to draw the flowers, though. If you spend 6 days drawing Trump, you can spend one day drawing flowers.
Yes, you can do that on this.
And it's actually good for I really have found a great deal of solace in art that is not political. I have to shut off the stream of garbage that comes through. And could you wave your hand over the ocean again, please? That's great. Thank you. It's Moses. Yes. So I have I'm always reading like 3 books. So they're like 2 nonfiction horrifying books about racism and greed and oligarchy, and then Henry James. Or I actually read War and Peace this year. And although War and Peace, it's unavoidable, the politics in that. But I read it for the beauty of the writing. I have a need to shut the news off and listen to Miles Davis or
Yes. Of course you do. I mean, I watch Doris Day movies to decompress.
Well, that would not be on my list, but I have put in my time with Doris in the past. I was alive around those years, so I was subjected to that touch of mink. I remember those movies.
Oh, they're great.
But I need literature. I need music. I need Mendelssohn.
Yeah.
I need Fellini. They're nourishing. So if you can take a break from the horrors of the week and relax in the hands of a great artist.
Yes.
They also remind us what we're wanting and willing to protect.
That's right.
Right. I mean, if that's why we engage with the other forms of art, because it reminds us why we have a soul, how we have a soul, how we can make our souls grow. And if you can recognize that in yourself and other people, then it makes you, it increases your anger at anybody who would want to jeopardize that or take it away.
I think we're going to see a flowering of art now. I think we're going to see an explosion of people who want to go to a concert and, show up to the band that couldn't get into the Kennedy Center, or to a ballet performance that is deemed too woke. Maybe Trump would consider Alvin Ailey woke. And,
Right.
you know, all these guys, back to the Dylan movie, they were all saying fuck you, basically, to Joseph McCarthy. This was the backlash to the end of McCarthyism. McCarthy was being gradually, the blacklists were being lifted, and out comes, the great comedians who came along at that time, and the great folk singers who went into other forms of music, and great filmmakers. And it all comes sort of from the same place of fuck you, McCarthy.
Yeah.
No, we're going to talk about sex now. Jules Pfeiffer, right?
Yeah.
Jules Pfeiffer is part of that whole thing, big
100%. Yeah.
We're going to talk about stuff, neurosis. And so we're in that place now because of those people, and it's going to be a lot easier to have our revolution.
And I think, and I love that you're talking like that, because it's how I think every single day. And again, I just always have to go back to that question of just like how I think that figuring out how to get better funding, unfortunately, into the arts community is key to this.
Dwayne, do you have Substack?
I just started 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So Ann Telnaes has got one of the biggest ones, I think, now. And she's just on it for 15 minutes, my God. And she's got many thousands of subscribers. And so when you get enough subscribers on Substack, Keith, I don't know how are you syndicated? You're syndicated into papers, right? So you don't need Substack.
Oh no! Oh, I need Substack.
You do? Okay.
No, I gotta thank Anne, because Anne recommended me on Substack 1 week, and I ended up getting like 5,000 subscribers.
And some paid? Are you charging?
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's
this is like, I get enough from Substack to cover 3 additional courses. I would teach three courses for the amount of money that comes in. This is a piece of my annual income now, and I never dreamed it'd be possible. So I recommend Substack to all cartoonists. Paul Krugman has migrated there.
Well, I would suggest Substack, Patreon. I do a MailChimp newsletter.
Yeah.
And each one of those, I got people who will subscribe to all 3. And it's not like I'm doing much different on there's a few subtle differences, but basically, and I do this, I mentor cartoonists, I do stuff about just, how to sort of adjust and make a living as a cartoonist. And the thing is, people out there want to support you. They want to support you, and you just need to give them multiple ways to support. Because there are people out there that will want to support you, but they don't want to deal with Patreon. They had something happen with Patreon, so they want something else. Or, they don't, Substack, they don't like something they saw on Substack, so they want it. So they're always looking for different things. So I just, I basically look to see, who's doing what, and just kind of sort of follow their lead. And I just remember consciously, I've said this before, and I can't remember how long it was ago, 15, 20 years ago, going to an AAEC convention. And I was super psyched because I was like, okay, I'm gonna learn from all these older guys in the industry. And they all came to me and they said, hey, I'm losing my job. Like, they were coming to me, and I was like, oh man, we're doomed if they continue this stuff. So right then, I remember consciously going, I got to start listening to people younger than me. And that's where I discovered Patreon and like all this online stuff, and just, and I still have people who just say, hey, Keith, I think you do pretty good on this site, or apply for this thing. And I've just started to move into getting grants, which is something that I had never even, for a long time had not even considered. But I
Yeah.
just got a grant to teach cartooning for the next 2 years to public high school and middle school students. And
Great.
Perfect.
yeah. And
Bravo.
so it's those type of things that I feel very fortunate that, people tell me about this stuff, and then I am lucky enough to take advantage of. So
Well, this brings us back to what we were talking about not waiting for, the proper channels to present us with a living wage, because in many ways, what we're talking about is a people's movement, right? And so if we can get that to be, the new funding for a resurgence of an arts community that then does run headlong into all of these important issues that we cartoon about fearlessly, then we don't have to wait for idiots to be drawing the parameters of the conversation. We actually lead the conversation. It's not all about just then reacting.
I lost this year two of my very few regular places where I appeared in the mainstream. One was Washington Post, and the other is, and you remember Washington Post and LA Times, where the publisher was cavorting with Trump and Saudi Arabia 3 days ago. And I'm thinking, do I have to wonder why I'm no longer working at the LA Times? So Substack is here. I have Substack and I have The Nation, and I don't think The Nation's ever going away. And I'm fine. I'm really fine with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to have to scoot in about 10, 15.
That's when we're going to end this.
You're going to end it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say this. I think as cartoonists, and I remember saying this a long time ago, that, and especially as an alternative weekly cartoonist, that we have practiced sort of, we've always been sort of freelance. Like this whole sort of, hustle and, have your own thing and be your own business person. Like we've done this far longer than everybody else who's had to. So we already, we're a few steps ahead than I think a lot of people. And so I'm watching people losing their gigs right now with, their government gigs, or, the government screwing over whatever business whatever business they work for. And I just sit there and go, man, I feel so lucky, that I had this crappy job that no one could really fire me from except the people.
Right.
So
no, that's a very virtuous thing to be proud of, and I love it. So before I have to blow out one of these candles. I don't know if you noticed, but I've got like a Christmas atmosphere going here, and I made the mistake of lighting two scented candles, and one of them is tobacco and coffee, and the other one is called Cabin in the Woods. And all of a sudden, I'm just like, it's like Ted Kaczynski or something. They just blend those and just have one to make me super uncomfortable, just like through the
I'm
conversation.
glad this is not smell-o-vision.
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay. Well,
All right, I feel better now. All right, so just like, did you have something to add to what we were saying, Anne? You just looked like
no, I was just going to tell everybody it's nice to see you guys. We should
Well, yeah.
often, not just on, Dwayne's podcast.
And did you all congratulate Anne on her Pulitzer when we started?
Oh, immediately.
Steve, I already did long before you got on the podcast.
I'm sorry. Well, I don't want to be left out, so congratulations, Anne.
Thank
Yes.
you.
We're
Thank
also
you.
proud of you. You yet again elevate the rest of us.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys know if Trump's administration allows us to have the award ceremony at
Oh, true.
We'll see.
Well, let's end with that then. Let's end. I feel like we're ending on a positive note. We got freaking hippie Steve just like shaking the tambourine about how things are going to be great. Um, and I think that
Think-
we all sort of are
things
plugged into
things are not going to be great. Things are going to be energized. That's all I'm saying.
energized. Oh, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
There's
I
going to
like
be a lot. There're going to be many casualties. I'm afraid. I believe that.
Yeah. Well, in the end, things will hopefully land us in a better place, a freer society with something to wake up to. Nice. But so ending that, is there anything that you guys want to say that you're doing? Like, what are you doing now that you want to let the folks know about, that they can say, wow, something. Steve, you know what? I never even get to say, this is one thing. Are you looking for the dog, Steve?
No, I'm looking for something to hold up and show you what I'm doing.
Oh, that would be good.
Well, I'm doing a fun show tonight in Durham. It's sort of like a indie Comic Con. Um, there's a lot of really funky stuff that they have here in Durham, North Carolina. So
Mm,
I'm hawking my new book,
Oh, let's
which
see.
isn't really that new, but Kiefer
mm,
Madness. Um,
nice.
and it's the cover drawing is me in a straitjacket, and someone says he says he still wants to be a cartoonist. Um, but
Any
um,
resurgence of woke coming up by any chance?
geez, I wish I actually I'm working on a new pitch. My writing partner for the show just got a deal for he's bringing back his first script he worked on that sold was Barbershop back in the day, and so they're doing a reboot of it as a series, and so once that it just got announced, I mean now he has this window of like a few months of being able to walk into any place and pitch whatever. So he reached out to me and said, okay, what's the thing? What's the next thing you want to do? And so I have these characters that I had cut out from the deal to develop Woke that I was going to develop their own show for them, an
Sweet.
animated thing. So I'm working on that right now, the pitch, and also working on an animated cartoon of one of my classic strips with a friend in Los Angeles. So we should be finishing that up soon. And what I love about it is some of the actors from my show are going to be doing secret guest voices for the animation. So
Oh, sweet.
yeah.
Wow.
Keith
That's a
Keith
great
is
question.
really pointing the way. I'm glad you made those remarks before about going to the old timers, and they actually need to learn from you. And teaching is very important, and there are people who are pointing the way to the future. And Peter Cooper is one of them, who publishes book after book. I went to his opening here last night at the Society. He's got a wonderful book out. Keith is another one. Lalo Alcaraz, who won the RFK Senior Award yesterday. And he also cartoons, makes films, make TV. Hey kids, any kids watching, young artists watching, look to these leaders. They'll give you ideas, and it's not all, it's harder to be this creative. It's harder to invent the new format.
And I will say this, Jules Pfeiffer was the prototype, um,
Do you know that Jules didn't take a nickel from the Village Voice for the first 10 years?
oh, just reading about it, like just confirmed. I always thought he was the prototype, but reading about it, I always tell people this. Your comic you should consider it almost like an ad for your brand. So even if you're not making, and listen, I'm in a few newspapers, I make, a little bit of money, but it's like an ad that you're getting a little bit of money for instead of you paying that money. And then what comes from that, the teaching gigs, the speaking gigs, if you're lucky enough, a TV show or a film, all these projects come from this ad that people check in on every week. And so if you consider it like that, you won't, that way I don't feel half as sad when I see the, the little tiny checks that come in. They're not even checks anymore. They just come into you. I miss the multiple check days. When you open your,
We
and you're
all.
like, oh, there's
The
3 of them.
important thing is to tell the kids you can do things that will make you happy. You can work
Yeah.
for the money, but then find time in your life to build this business where you're doing things you love and you find your people, find your constituents. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be people who like dogs. Isn't he cute?
Nice.
Still watching me. He's watching. And it could be people who care about shoes, football, food. You'll do best if you talk about food in your cartoons. It's just, you will find people who share your interest.
Yeah.
You just have
And it
to,
won't feel like a job either. I mean, that's one of the
No.
key things too. I mean, I feel like I haven't had a job in 30 years just because I've been being paid for stuff that I love to do.
you look happy. You look happy to me.
Oh, great.
And you got hair too. That's really a good thing.
I just got this cut because I've been biking a lot. It was much longer. So
Next time you get a cut, send some to me. I can just.
No,
I
you
will.
look like Steve Miller if you paste that on.
Oh, let's not do that. One bad Jew is bad enough.
Yeah. So
You're against genocide. You're a good Jew.
that's
I'll just
I get in
throw
trouble
that
for
out
saying
there.
such things.
Huh?
I get in trouble for saying such things.
First, you have to convert. That's all.
That's right.
I think every Palestinian should immediately convert to Judaism. That would send the whole thing right. Look, who's the kitty? Who's the kitty?
This is Cheerful.
Cheerful.
He's
How
very
many
vocal.
do you? How many do you have?
I got 2, and I got 2 chickens. Thankfully, the chickens are outside. Otherwise, you'd be hearing a lot of
Never
noise.
introduced them. I think.
I know. We just
We
had
need a part 2.
we homeschool here. We just had our class, and so the cats hide when all the kids are here, and now that the kids have gone, they come out like about an hour later. Like just when I got onto the podcast, the kids were just leaving, and I teach cartooning, and then my wife teaches Shakespeare, and it's like the hardest class. She's German. It's the hardest class I've ever seen anybody. I was telling the kids at the end, because it was the last class of the day, I said, listen, you're going to get Shakespeare again somewhere in college or like later on in high school or something. And you're going to sit there and go, oh my goodness, like this is easy. Because my wife is so hardcore that like German, has to be this, has to be that. And it's really funny to see. But
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that it was hard because she actually teaches it in German.
it might be easier if she taught it in German. 'Cause I'm like, what? No, it's been fun though. And then sometimes we do homework assignments where they have to draw a comic about Shakespeare. And yeah, like they have to take a Shakespeare, some lines, and somehow put it in a comic and make it all work, which is fun.
Sweet.
Guys,
I kinda
I have
think
to
it
go.
sounds-
Yeah, me too.
Yes. All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining the conversation and being the best part of it. And I'll see you guys on the battlefield,
You
whatever that.
guys are the best. I admire all your work.
Oh,
It's
Keep
an
your
honor
faith,
to
Amen.
be a
baby.
part, an
Keep
honor to be
going.
a part of it.
bye.
Bye
Have
for
a
now.
great one.